Hello everyone, my name is Hailey Elizabeth, and if you don't know who I am, this is my true crime podcast where once a week I sit down and I talk about all things true crime, ranging from murders, disappearances, cults, all the way to the biggest drug bust in history, the biggest bank heist in history, all things true crime. So if you're interested in any of that, you could head over to the YouTube channel and watch the visual version every Wednesday, or you could head over to Spotify, Apple, wherever you can find podcasts, and listen to the audio version every Tuesday. Now for today's case, we're going to be talking about the case of Lesley Herring. Now there is a lot to get through, so we're just gonna hop right into it. Lesley Herring was a 44-year-old woman from Guyana, South America. She grew up with her brother Lyndon and her sister Asha. When she was a kid, however, her parents decided to pack up all of their things and move from South America to Los Angeles, California. As a child, she was described as more of like the mom of the group. She was extremely responsible for her age. She was very mature for her age as well. She was always the one that was like kind of taking care of everyone else, and she was the one to step in and be like, hey guys, this is not a good idea, we should not be doing this. A lot of people described her as just like, you know, she's very sweet and joyful and happy, but do not cross her because she will cross you as well. Like, she did not put up with any nonsense. She stood up for herself, she stood up for her friends, her family. And this sort of behavior followed into her teen years as well, where she would just be very responsible all the way around when it came to her education, her finances, and she also developed a very close relationship with her sister Asha and her mother. The three of them were like the three musketeers. They did everything together. And her sister, actually, Asha Davis, you may or may not heard of her, but she is a very famous actress. She's been on multiple different like really big TV shows like Grey's Anatomy and Friday Night Lights. Lesley was absolutely so proud of her sister Asha. She was like her number one fan. She always stood by her side. But as for Lesley, she was not really interested in the spotlight for herself. She valued her privacy a lot, and you know, being out there wasn't really something that she was interested in. And so that is when she started working an office job at a home security company in the Hollywood area. And shortly after she got this position, as I said, she was very responsible, she was very mature, and so because of this, she used her hard work ethic to work her way up to the top pretty quickly to where she had a very high position with this company. She was very career driven, she was very determined, she was an independent woman, she kind of just like did things on her own, and she was very, very dedicated to her work. A lot of people would actually call her a workaholic, and so because of this, you know, her drive for her future, she didn't really have much time for men or love in general. Being in a relationship just wasn't really interesting to her at the time. But it wasn't until the early 2000s when Lesley would meet a man by the name of Lyle Herring. When Lesley and Lyle first met, Lesley thought that Lyle was the most beautiful man she's ever seen. She was attracted to him immediately, and not just his looks. Lyle had a lot of the same morals as Lesley. He was very, very career driven. He was determined. He was very responsible with his finances and money, which she also adored. But this couple actually did get a couple of stares just because of their huge age gap. At this time, Lyle was in his late 40s while Lesley was in her mid 20s. So there was about a 20-year age gap, but as I said, Lesley was very mature for her age, and so she just felt like even as a kid that her mindset did not really align with everyone else's around her. They wanted to, you know, go out, drink, smoke, go to the club and party, but that was just not something she was interested in. And so because of her very mature mindset, she tended to gravitate more towards older men. And as for Lyle, Lyle was described as a very social butterfly. He hung around with a lot of different groups, and he always had this very charming and outgoing personality. A lot of people would describe Lyle as like, if you had a problem with Lyle, it was definitely a you problem because Lyle didn't do anything. He only spoke positively about people. He wasn't like disloyal to his friends or anything. And Lesley absolutely loved this about Lyle. And in the beginning of their relationship, Lesley and Lyle fell in love quite quickly. And then right after that, they ended up going to the courthouse to get married. And at this point, they weren't even living together. They had just known each other for a couple of months. Shortly after they got married, usually the next step is to move in with one another. And so since Lyle was very, very successful and wealthy, and Lesley was also successful and wealthy, they decided to get a luxury condo in the middle of LA, as well as buying a sailboat that the couple would frequently use. And looking from the outside, people view Lesley and Lyle as like the power couple. They were wealthy, they were focused, they were dedicated, and they were also very in love. Whenever the couple would go on like little vacations together, they would always walk around wearing matching hats and matching shirts. They were always, out and about holding hands. And although the couple saw each other every single day, they loved each other so much to the point where they never got tired of each other's company. Even though they had been married for years and years, they still got butterflies every time they saw each other. That's just how in love these two were. Then on February 9th of 2009, that is when Lesley's boss had called Asha, Lesley's sister, to let her know that Lesley didn't come into work that day, and her boss is also struggling to get in contact with her. Her boss had called Lesley multiple times, but there was no answer, and so she decided to call Asha because Asha was like her emergency contact, just to make sure that everything was okay with Lesley. And the fact of Lesley not coming into work was extremely nerve-wracking and very odd because, as I said, Lesley is a workaholic. Like, she is always on time, and even when she's not on time, she's always early. Lesley was not the type of person to just not go into work, like a no-call, no-show. That was not her at all. She was very dedicated to her work. So the fact that she didn't go into work that day and she's not picking up her phone, it just left this very deep worry about where Lesley was. And so Asha hung up the phone with Lesley's boss, and she immediately called their brother Lyndon. Asha was like, hey, Lesley's boss just called me and Lesley's not picking up the phone. When's the last time you've talked to her? And that's when Lyndon realizes that he hasn't seen or talked to Lesley in a couple of days. At that point, that's when the worry really started to set in for the two of them. Since they're trying to look for Lesley, the first person they think is Lyle, of course. The two of them are madly in love. They live together, they're married, and so Asha and Lyndon attempt at calling Lyle, but Lyle too is not picking up the phone. This really worries them because now they're, thinking the worst of the worst. Oh my God, did something happen to them? Were they riding their sailboat and they crashed somewhere? Did they get into a car accident and can't call anyone? When things like this happen, it's human nature just for your mind to go to the worst of the worst. And so that is when Asha and Lyndon decide to go over to Lesley and Lyle's condo just to check up on them and make sure that everything is okay. They're thinking, well, maybe they slept in on accident, maybe they're not by their phones. They knock on the door, but no one comes in, and they're attempting at getting into the condo as well because it's locked. But after hours and hours standing outside her condo, just knocking, asking neighbors, trying to get in, they eventually decided that they needed to call the police. And so the police did come down to do a wellness check. And if you guys don't know what a wellness check is, it's basically like if you have a concern for someone who is like in a specific house or apartment or something and you can't really get inside, you call the police and they do a wellness check on that person. And it is proper protocol that the officers cannot leave the home unless they see that the person they're doing a wellness check on is like alive and well and healthy, and then that's the only way that they could leave. So when the police get there and the door is locked, they have no choice but to break down the front door after knocking multiple times. And so when the police are actually let into the condo, they're taking a look around and nothing really piques their interest or anything. It looks like a typical tidy apartment. There was nothing really that was majorly off, but there was a few odd things. Like, for example, there was a candle on the counter that had spilled. So like the hot wax had spilled all over the counter, the side of the counter, onto the floor, and the wax was also dried up as well, as if it had been there for a while. And so this was very odd to police because, especially spilling a candle, that's not something that you just accidentally do then walk away from. Like, usually when you spill something like that, you're immediately like going to clean it up. And especially with Lesley, she kept her apartment clean, and so she would not just let this dry up. Another thing that was very odd was that in the bathroom, there was this big mound of towels just sitting next to the bathtub. And on the top, the towels were dry, but on the bottom, the towels were still soaked, as if like someone was trying to soak up a bunch of water, as well as like all of the bath mats and bath towels being hung over the shower rod as if they were drying out. This was something that was very odd, but it wasn't too odd because they're thinking, okay, well, they could easily just have like plumbing issues or something. So other than these small little things, there really wasn't much for the police to go off of. They also investigated the apartment to see if there was signs of a break-in. There was no signs of a break-in, and so the only thing that they could really do was file for a missing persons report. And so that is when Asha and Lyndon go down to the station and they file Lesley as a missing person. After she was filed as a missing person, that's when the police started to do a little bit of digging to try to figure out when the last time Lesley was seen. And they found that Lesley was last seen and heard on the evening of February 6th, 3 days prior. Now, the day that she was called in as missing was Monday, and the day that she was last seen was Friday. And that was actually by her co-workers who had seen her like go off to her car and go home at the end of the night. But that entire weekend, no one had seen Lesley. Although when the police did even more digging, they did find that Lesley did indeed have a phone conversation on Sunday morning. So she was heard, but she wasn't physically seen. Like, we don't know what her physical state was. We don't know if she was like sickly looking or anything. And so now is when we begin the search for Lesley. And the next day, Lesley's face was everywhere. She was on lampposts, she was on TV. Asha, as I said, she's a very famous actress, and so she was using her audience and her social media following to try and help to find Lesley. But days and days went by and nothing came forward about where Lesley was. So as days and days went, nothing was heard from either Lesley or Lyle, and so that is when the police decided to put alerts on Lesley and Lyle's cars in assumption that maybe the two of them ran away together, or maybe they're, leaving their old life behind to start a new one. And even if they were doing that, the police wanted to make sure that at least they were alive and okay so they can stop looking for them. And so they did put an alert on both of their cars, but 2 weeks went by and still nothing. They believe that whatever happened to Lesley also happened to Lyle because both of them weren't picking up the phone, but the family just had this deep feeling that they weren't going to find Lesley alive. Also, the family just said that this was so unlike Lesley for her to run away, because at this point, she lived such a great life. She had a beautiful and loving husband. She had this huge, beautiful condo. She had her sailboat. She had a thriving career. And 4 weeks before this, Asha actually had her first child. And Lesley was so excited to be an aunt. And so it seemed like her life was doing so well. And also, Lesley, again, is not the type of person to just like get walked all over. If there's a problem, she's gonna let you know about it. And so from the looks of her life, it just seemed too good to run away from. But it wasn't until 2 weeks after Lesley had gone missing where the police would finally get their first breakthrough. The police actually found Lyle's car trying to cross over into the Mexican border, but inside was Lyle and no Lesley. Lyle was immediately taken to the station and taken in for questioning onto, where have you been for the last 2 weeks? Why have you not been picking up your phone? Where is Lesley? Where is your phone? He explains to the police that the last time he saw Lesley was on February 7th, Saturday night. He says that night, the two of them gotten into an argument about something, although he doesn't really get too in depth about what this argument was about, but he said that night they went to bed angry, and so when he woke up in the morning, Lesley was gone. So immediately when he realized Lesley was gone, he attempted at calling her, but she wasn't picking up the phone, so he assumed, okay, she's still mad about our argument, I'm just gonna give her some space to breathe and think, and he did the same for himself. He got in his car and he drove around all day, and then later on that night he came home and Lesley still wasn't there. And so over the next couple of days he continuously tried to call and text Lesley, but there was no reply and he had no idea where she was. And the only reason he was crossing over into Mexico is because the two of them actually had a vacation booked in Mexico. So he was thinking, okay, well, she might be in Mexico at this resort because we had booked it and everything. And so that's why he was going to Mexico. And so the story that Lyle gives is definitely a story, but it's not the story they're looking for, because as you can see, there are so many gaps in the story as to where was he for the last 2 weeks, because he definitely wasn't at the condo. The police had broken into there and saw that Lyle wasn't there. And so the police start pressing him a little bit more and start asking him questions like, is it normal for Lesley to just go weeks without talking to anyone? Is it normal for her to run away? Why didn't you call the police immediately afterwards? Why have you been ignoring the family? And so all of these questions are being asked, and Lyle gets overwhelmed and he buckles up and he just says, no more questions. I don't want to do this interview. I'm requesting a lawyer. That's it. I'm not going to sit here and be blamed for something I didn't do. And he basically just stormed out of the station. But unfortunately, since the police didn't have enough evidence to arrest or accuse Lyle, they just had to let him go. So the interview ended, and unfortunately, the police were left with so many more questions than they started with, because now they're wondering, why didn't Lyle call the police? And if he didn't want to call the police, why didn't he call Lesley's family? They started to think, if he was really looking for Lesley, wouldn't the first place you look was Asha's place, because Asha was Lesley's best friend? Lesley could have easily been there, and then he just searched for 2 weeks for nothing. It was just so odd that, Lyle, he says that Lesley was the love of his life, but he had such a lack of care for her well-being. And even Asha in an interview had said how wild this behavior is coming from Lyle, and that his lack of care for Lesley and not going to the police was very, very odd, as well as him not wanting to speak to the family. And even after his police interrogation, he was still avoiding Lesley's family. Hey guys, don't worry, it's still me, just in sponsorship mode, thanking the sponsor of today's episode, ZocDoc. Now, personally, I am afraid of doctors, not because of the actual environment. I just feel like sometimes being at a doctor's office is so intimidating, and also trying to find a doctor, and not just find a doctor, but find a doctor that takes your health insurance is even more frustrating, where sometimes I just kind of feel like resorting to my group chats and just being like, hey, what does this mean? But you don't really get much medical advice in your group chat. But thanks to ZocDoc, all those problems are gone. Thousands of medical professionals on ZocDoc are there to help you. They listen like a friend and give you the expert care you need. There are better ways to get the answers you want and the care that you deserve from trusted professionals, and not just random people on the internet. ZocDoc helps you find expert doctors and medical professionals that specialize in the care you need and deliver the type of experience you want. When someone is extremely good at what they do, it could be a waiter, a chef, or a doctor, you know you're in good hands. On ZocDoc, finding the doctor that is right for you is seamless, and the quality care you need is just a few taps away in the ZocDoc app. There's nothing worse than getting to a doctor's appointment expecting to be the center of attention, and then your doctor seems like they are having other things to do and better places to be, but instead of listening to you and asking you how you feel and helping you along, the doctor is just checking the clock. But on ZocDoc, you'll find quality doctors who focus on you, listen to you, and prioritize your care. ZocDoc is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors with patient-reviewed and take your insurance, are available when you need them, and treat almost every condition under the sun. When you are not feeling your best and just trying to hold it together, finding great care shouldn't take up all your energy. That's where ZocDoc comes in. Using the free app that millions of users rely on, you can find the right doctor that that meets your needs and fits your schedule. Book an appointment with just a few taps on their app and start feeling better with ZocDoc. Go to ZocDoc.com/behind and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That is ZocDoc, ZocDoc.com/behind, ZocDoc.com/behind. And thank you to ZocDoc for sponsoring today's episode. Now back to your episode. A couple days go by and the police were able to get Lyle in for a second interview. And in the second interview, the detectives actually bring up something that they wanted to bring up in the first interview but never got around to, and it was Lyle's appearance. So prior to Lesley going missing, Lyle had these really long dreadlocks. He had a full beard, but when he was found, he had a shaved beard, like a clean face, and his dreads were also gone, like he had shaved his head. And for those who don't know, dreadlocks are really hard to keep and maintain. They take a very, very long time to create, especially with how long Lyle's dreadlocks were. That probably took him a good 2-3 years to make. And that's why usually people who have dreadlocks are very proud of their dreadlocks, just because they are difficult to maintain. And so the police were confused as to why he shaved his dreadlocks off, because if he was looking for Lesley, why did his appearance matter so much? Why did he just randomly decide to get a haircut? And to this, Lyle gives probably the craziest story. He says that one day he was walking down the street, and that is when he was jumped by a gang of men that he owed money to, which he never goes into detail as to why he owes this group of men money. But he says that this group of men had stopped him, jumped him, pinned him down to the ground, and shaved his head and shaved his beard as a way to get back at him, which the police are looking at him in awe as to who is going to believe this story. You're really telling us that a gang of men that you owed a lot of money to would pin you down and then just line you up real quick? They give you a number 1 on the side, number 2 on the top. It made no sense. It was so bizarre that he thought the police were actually going to buy this story. But that's the story that he gave, and unfortunately for this second interview, they couldn't really pin him to the time of the crime, because what if he did get a haircut? Getting a haircut is not a crime. It's definitely odd behavior, but it's nothing to be arrested over. And so unfortunately for the second interview, they had to just let him go. Police at this point kind of feel very lost, so they go back to the drawing board. They're trying to figure out more things to do, and that's when they're able to obtain a search warrant to search Lyle and Lesley's condo. So they go to the condo, and now they're searching it more extensively, because last time it was more of just a wellness check. And so as they're looking around, they notice more odd things around the apartment that they didn't realize before. One of those odd things was Lesley's jewelry was still on her nightstand. Now this was very, very odd, because Lesley, she is a classy woman, and it was even said by all her family and friends, she never got up out of bed without her jewelry on. She never left the house without her jewelry on. She always had earrings or a necklace or a ring or something. And so the fact that she would leave the house without her jewelry was just so unlike Lesley, and it kind of makes the police wonder if she even got up in the morning at all. And another really odd thing that they found was inside of Lesley's nightstand, shoved in there was a letter, and it was a handwritten note from Lesley to Lyle, and this note goes into extensive detail about all of the troubles that the couple was actually having in their relationship. So from this note, we know that Lyle just recently got let go from his job, and so during his transitional period of him trying to find a new job, the couple was using their savings just to keep them afloat until Lyle got a new job. But Lyle ended up getting a little bit too comfortable with the unemployed lifestyle, and so instead of looking for a job, he just ended up using all of their savings, and he was irrationally spending their money. He would spend thousands of dollars on resorts and vacations and new cars, and Lesley told him we don't have the money for this anymore because you're not working. But no matter how much Lesley told him that, Lyle just didn't really listen. He still spent the money however he wanted. Lesley wrote that she shouldn't have to live this way, living in fear every day of not knowing if she's going to have a roof over her head. And Lyle at this point had just bought a vacation for $1,200, which Lesley also goes into detail with, saying that they cannot afford it and he needs to refund it immediately. She says that she works hard for the both of them, and that's extremely unfair because they are a couple. They're both supposed to be putting in 100%. And she also says that the two of them are going into debt due to his spending habits. And there's even one part of the note where she puts the word husband in quotations as if to imply that Lyle wasn't a real husband. And at the end of the note, she ends it off by saying, quote, "I don't think I can recover from this experience. I can't take any more. I am broken." So this note was a huge piece of evidence because it clearly showed that if, Lyle did do something to Lesley, there's clear financial motive there. But the police start doing a little bit more digging around, and the police end up finding even a bigger piece of evidence, and it is Lesley's purse. They find Lesley's purse kind of hidden away in their closet, and inside of her purse is everything that belongs to Lesley: her driver's license, her IDs, all of her credit cards, her debit cards, her wallet, her passport. Like, if Lesley were to go somewhere and run away, she would not be able to get very far without these things. And so within this purse, they also found a Starbucks receipt that was made 4 days after Lesley's disappearance. And so the police see this receipt and they're thinking, oh my God, like, this is Lesley's purse and there's a receipt inside of her purse 4 days after she went missing. Maybe she actually still is alive. The police end up going to that exact Starbucks. They look at the security footage, but on the security footage at the same time of the Starbucks receipt, it wasn't Lesley that walked through the door. It was actually Lyle. Lyle was the one that bought a Starbucks drink and then he went back home, and since he was the one that had the receipt, it is assumed that he is the one who planted the receipt inside of Lesley's purse to make it look like Lesley was out and about, just to basically cover up his tracks. So now that Lyle was being looked at a little bit heavier, I guess this is where Lyle started to try and gain sympathy from the public. So he went on news stations, he went on interviews, and he was crying and he was asking witnesses to come forward and anybody with any information. And this was very odd behavior coming from Lyle, because this is coming from the same guy that just a couple days earlier went mute for an entire 2 weeks and ignored Lesley's family as they were going through probably the most traumatizing thing they have ever gone through. Yet Lyle was just ignoring them on purpose. And he was also the one who, when he tried to talk to the police, he stopped the interview as soon as the police started to suggest that he might have something to do with it. And so this quick change of behavior was very concerning. And also at this point, Lyle has never really come out to the police to exactly tell them where he was for the past 2 weeks. He basically just says that he was searching for Lesley, whatever that means, because apparently he also got mugged in the meantime. And to a certain extent, I do understand why Lyle would not want to contact the police specifically, because unfortunately a lot of the times when it comes to missing persons cases, especially women of color, it's very 50-50 if it's going to be taken seriously by the police. And sometimes going to the police with situations like that can be a little nerve-wracking and scary. And so I can understand why Lyle wouldn't want to go to the police, but just completely shutting out her family, her family is probably the people you want to contact first because they're closest with Lesley, so they probably know where she's at. Yet Lyle was ignoring them and not contacting them at all. So after the very first search of the apartment, that is when the police were able to gather enough evidence to be able to get a seize warrant and seize all of Lyle's electronics. So they took his computer, his phone, his laptop, and when looking through Lyle's phone, they actually found phone records of on the day Lesley went missing. Lyle actually did call Lesley multiple times throughout the day, but weirdly enough, all of those phone calls were picked up by Lesley. And so the police are starting to get some hope. They're thinking, okay, Lesley is alive. She's somewhere. Let's try to track the locations of where these phones were at the time of when these phone calls were being made, because maybe we'll be able to find Lesley's phone and figure out where she is. But when they looked at the location, they found that both phones were inside of their condo, as if both phones were just sitting next to each other. And so the police just found another one of Lyle's cover-ups. He tried to cover up his tracks with the Starbucks receipt, and now it seems like he's trying to cover up his tracks again by basically making it look like Lesley was picking up the phone throughout the day to make it look like she wasn't gone when she actually was. And so now that they're suspecting Lyle a little bit more, that is when they start trying to interview Lyle's close family and friends just to get a little bit more information on who he is as a person. And when the police were speaking with Lyle's family and friends, they were surprised to find that Lyle actually had a different side to him that he didn't show many people. Lyle, on the outside, he was indeed a guy that everybody loved. He was outgoing, he was focused, he was charming, he was funny, but only to women. The male friends and the male family members noticed that Lyle would barely talk to any of his male friends or any of his male family members. And when they did talk to them, the males just got a really weird vibe from Lyle. Like there was just something off about him. And so every time the males would mention this to the females, they would always say, you know, oh, well, that's just Lyle. He's charming. He's funny. Like he's just a good guy. But it seemed to the police that maybe Lyle was just better at manipulating women than he was men. And so as the police were interviewing more and more people, they ended up interviewing Lyle's cousin Malcolm. And Malcolm actually saw Lyle days after Lesley's disappearance. But at this point, it wasn't like public information that Lesley was missing. And Malcolm said that this hangout with Lyle was very, very odd. Lyle was acting very weird. The first weird thing that he did was that he wouldn't allow Malcolm to come upstairs. So the two of them met in Lyle's parking garage, like downstairs to his apartment, and they basically just hung out in Malcolm's car for a little bit, just like talked and hung out. But Malcolm said that Lyle was acting really off. He was very jittery, and he at times was saying things that were so out of context and didn't really make sense. But now knowing that Lesley is missing, he's looking back on those things and realizing that it actually makes tons of sense. One of his out of context comments that he said was, quote, "Man, I'm gonna go to hell for the things that I have done." And to this, Malcolm just kind of like laughed it off. He didn't really think much of it because it's kind of similar to like when your friend makes a dark humor joke and says like, "Oh, we're going to hell for this," or "I'm going to hell for this." That's what he thought. So he just kind of laughed it off and was like, "Oh, me too." But now looking back on that comment, he realizes that he was probably talking about something relating to Lesley. He also says that Lyle just seemed really jittery, really on edge, and there was one point where Malcolm actually had to leave Lyle early because Malcolm had asked Lyle like, "Hey, do you mind if I go upstairs and use your bathroom real quick? Like I'm only gonna be 2 seconds." But Lyle refused to let Malcolm into the apartment. He just said, "No, you can't go up there. We're doing renovations. Like it's a mess up there. You can't go up there." And so Malcolm had to leave Lyle, like leave their hangout, just so he could go pee somewhere. And this kind of connected with the crime scene because if you remember, in the bathroom, there was big piles of wet towels laying by the bathtub. There were the bath mats and the towels like laying over the shower rod, drying as if something happened in the bathroom. And it would only make sense that if something happened in the bathroom, why Lyle was so cagey about not letting Malcolm into the bathroom. So now that all of this information was coming out about Lyle and how like sneaky he was and all these really weird things about him, people started to look even more suspiciously at him. And even the public was publicly blaming Lyle for what happened to Lesley, whatever happened to Lesley. And even Asha herself went on interviews and said that it's really weird that Lyle would not comply with the police. And if he had nothing to hide, then why wouldn't he just come out and tell the truth unless there was something that he was hiding? And she was so stressed, and you can definitely tell that everything was really taking a toll on her because Lesley was her best friend, and not knowing where she is or if she's alive or not, it takes a toll on anyone. And so one of Lyle's neighbors actually was watching this interview and felt really, really bad for Asha, and this kind of inspired them to call the police and tell the police something very suspicious that they saw Lyle doing on Saturday, February 7th, the last time Lyle says that he had seen Lesley. This neighbor, they say that around midnight on Saturday, they were coming home. As they were getting out of the elevator to go to their apartment, that is when they saw Lyle coming out of his apartment with a dolly. Like, if you guys don't know what a dolly is, it's like one of those two-wheeler things that you can carry stuff on, usually boxes and stuff like that. And so he comes out with one of those, and on top of it is a huge rolled up carpet. And so at the time, the neighbor didn't really think much of it. Now that the neighbor was really thinking about it, he was thinking that that carpet looked a little bit too wide to just be like rolled up like a normal carpet. And he also found it odd that Lyle was doing this at midnight. Like, isn't this usually an activity you save till the morning, like cleaning up wise? He said that he saw Lyle bring this dolly and this carpet onto the elevator and downstairs. And so at this point, the police are thinking, okay, if Lyle brought this carpet downstairs, he probably brought it down to his car. And so Lyle actually had two cars. He had a big SUV that was like his everyday car, and he kept it in the parking garage of his apartment, but he also had a second car, which was a vintage Cadillac, and this car he kept at a separate garage that was not at the apartment building. And so the police end up bringing cadaver dogs to both his SUV and his Cadillac, and on both cars, the dogs had found traces of a dead body in the trunk. When the police find this information, they don't tell anyone. They keep it as quiet as they can because they know Lyle has run away once, and if Lyle knows this information, he might run away again. And so the police know that they need to keep this quiet. And so what they do is that they actually attach trackers to both his SUV and his Cadillac in hopes that maybe he might return to the body or even like the area of where the crime had happened. And so they start following him around, and for the first 48 hours, they found nothing suspicious. Lyle wasn't doing anything weird. He was basically just going to work, hanging out with friends, but it wasn't until the third day that police saw something really, really odd coming from Lyle. Found that Lyle woke up at 6 in the morning, which is something that he never did. He drove in his SUV 3 miles to a nearby park, but this park wasn't really like a well-known park. It was just more of like a neighborhood cul-de-sac park. Like, it kind of tucked away. No one really went there. And the police found it really, really odd that he was there. They drove immediately to where Lyle was to see what he was doing. Maybe he was going into the woods. But what they saw was that they saw Lyle get out of his car, go straight to the big dumpsters that this park had. He walked around the dumpsters twice, kind of kicking around the dirt a little bit as if he was thinking, and then immediately got in his car and went home. And so this was very, very odd for the police, because why would Lyle wake up at 6 in the morning just to kick around some dirt like at a dumpster and then go home right afterwards? Police, once Lyle leaves, they get out of their cars and they bring cadaver dogs with them to sniff out the area and see, you know, if anything had been there. So they look inside the dumpster, but it had been emptied, so there was nothing really in there. As the cadaver dogs were sniffing around, they picked up on scents of a decomposing body about 3 feet away from the dumpsters on this big mound of dirt. And so this big mound of dirt, it looked fresh, it looked ruffled and disturbed as if it was freshly laid. And so they're thinking, you know, the worst of the worst. They're thinking, oh my God, we found the body is right there. So they call in diggers to dig up whatever this mound was, but unfortunately it was nothing. The diggers didn't find anything out of the ordinary. And so the police start theorizing. The dogs don't lie. Like, if there's a scent to be picked up, the dogs are gonna tell you. And so what they're thinking is maybe Lyle had put Lesley in the trunk of his car, but before putting her into the dumpster, he had laid her down on the ground first to then like go to the dumpster, lift up the top, and then put Lesley in there. And that would explain the sense of the decomposing body just 3 feet away from the dumpster. But if Lyle did put Lesley's body in the dumpster and rolled her up in carpet, it is unfortunate, but it is most likely that her body will never be found, because at this point it had been about like 2 months since Lesley went missing. So that means if Lesley's body was in a landfill, that means 2 months of garbage is on top of her body currently, and it is just impossible to try to find a body in a landfill, because even if you were to try to investigate the landfill, you would need a permit, like a search warrant, and then if you did have that permit, you would need to shut down the entire landfill for like a couple of days because it's huge. There's so much to go over, and to think the amount of trash that, you know, goes into a landfill on a daily basis, it would just have been impossible for them to find Lesley if they were to look in the landfill. And so unfortunately, that was the reality that the police and Lesley's family had to come to terms with, that Lesley was most likely dead in a landfill somewhere with 2 months worth of trash laying on top of her. And this was really hard for the family as well, because the disrespect of Lesley's body, and also now they don't have Lesley's body for a proper burial either. But the police were able at this point to gather enough evidence to arrest Lyle. And on the same exact day, Lyle was arrested at his work, but for some reason the police didn't want to arrest Lyle in front of his co-workers. So what they did was that they went into Lyle's work and they told him like, oh, your car is being towed outside because it's parked where it's not supposed to. And so once they got Lyle outside, that is when they arrested him. So as far as Lyle's trial, it was going to be very hard because the prosecutors didn't have anything really. They didn't have a body, they didn't have an autopsy, they didn't have any DNA matches. All they really had was witness statements, cadaver dogs, and his weird behaviors. And Lyle, of course, was pleading not guilty. And even to this day, we still don't really know what happened to Lesley, because Lyle was pleading not guilty and he just didn't want to say what happened. Because Lyle never flat out said what actually happened, the police from the crime scene and other pieces of evidence had put together a story of what they believe had happened. They believe that her cause of death was drowning due to the pile of towels in the bathroom, about how like the bottom ones were soaked but the top ones were dry. They also found it odd that he was drying out the bath mats over the shower rod. Drowning would make the most sense from the crime scene if Lesley was killed in the apartment. There was no traces of blood anywhere, like blood splatters, blood in the carpet, and so that is why they believe that she had drowned. On the night of February 7th, on Saturday, 2 days before Lesley didn't go into work on Monday, the couple had gotten into an argument. Now, from the note that Lesley had written Lyle, it's suspected that this argument was about Lyle's spending habits and why he needs to start looking for a job. This argument was a typical verbal argument until one thing led to another and it became physical, and that would explain the spilled candle on the counter. Once this exchange became physical, there was one point where Lyle had actually strangled Lesley to death, and when he had strangled her, he had put her in the bathtub and drowned her to death. Once he found that she was definitely dead, that is when he took her body, rolled her up in a carpet. It was believed that since there was sense of a body in both cars, what Lyle did was take her body downstairs to the big SUV, put her in the trunk, and then that's when he drove to his other car, his Cadillac, put her body in that trunk. He took his SUV, drove back to the condo, and he was there all night long trying to figure out a story, trying to figure out what he was going to do with himself, with Lesley's body, what he was going to say to the police and the family. And then in the morning, he returned to the Cadillac, took the body out of the trunk of that car, drove it to the park, and the park is where he disposed disposed of Lesley's body in the dumpster. And for not having a body or an autopsy or DNA matches or anything like that, the prosecutors actually had a pretty good case against Lyle. They had the fake phone calls that Lyle had been making of like, why would Lyle be calling Lesley if she was in the same house as him? Also, weirdly, Lesley had picked up. And so that means if they were in the same home together, that means Lyle would have to call Lesley and then Lesley picked up even though they're in the same house. Also had the Starbucks receipt that was planted inside of Lesley's purse, because if Lyle had bought the drink, how would that receipt even end up in Lesley's purse? And Lesley's purse was not out in the open. It was tucked away in the closet as if it was trying to be hidden. They also found it very odd that Lyle went MIA for an entire 2 weeks while Lesley was missing and completely shut out both the police and the family, did not respond to anyone. He also had a changed appearance as if he was on the run, and also his weird comments towards Malcolm. Malcolm actually testified at the trial, gave his whole explanation of what happened that day and all of his weird behaviors. The neighbor also went up and said about how he saw Lyle walking out of his apartment at midnight with a huge carpet on a dolly. And Lyle again was really giving no explanation to the police as to where he was for 2 weeks. Again, he just kept on saying, I'm searching for Lesley. But what exactly does that mean? Like, where were you looking? Because you clearly weren't looking with the family. You clearly saw that on TV, people were looking for her. Her face was on like lampposts and storefronts. She was everywhere. So the fact that Lyle just for 2 weeks did not know that Lesley was missing, and it's not like Lyle came to the family, he was caught. And that's the only reason why he came forward in the first place. If he was never caught at that Mexican border, who knows where he could have been. So after that, having like a lot of back and forth onto if Lesley is guilty or not, that is when the jury finally came to a verdict, and they found Lyle guilty for the second-degree murder of Lesley Herring and was sentenced to life with a minimum of 15 years, which means that Lyle is actually due for a trial next year in 2024 where he could possibly be released. As far as the aftermath of everything, usually at this point I will tell you guys like where everything is at now, but really there's nothing much more to tell about this story. I couldn't find anything about like Lyle's inmates and like what they think of Lyle. As far as we know now, Lyle is still in prison serving out his life sentence. As far as Lesley's family, they haven't really spoken about the situation much after it happened. All this happened in like 2009, so it's been a little over 10 years. So I would love to hear your guys' thoughts about the case. Do you think Lyle was guilty? Do you think that he's not guilty? What do you believe happened? Do you believe that she was drowned? Do you believe that Lyle should be released next year, or should he stay in prison for the rest of his life? Do you find it odd that Lyle went MIA for an entire 2 weeks and was trying to run away? Or do you think he was genuinely trying to search for Lesley? So many different things, and I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. But yeah, that is all from me. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Make sure to go outside today, get some fresh air, take in the sun, and if it's raining by you, take in the rain. You know, rain is relaxing, it's therapeutic. Just enjoy your day today, be safe out there, and as always, I love you, I love you, I love you, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.